Now, if you grew up a hip-hop head like me, the one thing that was a must in your collection was the Source magazine. We had to have that. That was essentially the hip-hop Bible for hip-hop fans. It was so important to the culture. It was our exposure to new artists. It's where we learned about what was going on in different regions of the country. We didn't have the internet, so we didn't know what was hot outside of our area. The Source is what told us. The Source let us know what was going on in hip-hop culture across the world. And it kept us very, very connected. And the thing that the Source became infamous for is its 5 mic rating. So when I would go to a drugstore, Rite Aid, Walgreens, whatever, I would rush to the magazine section, flip to the back of the latest Source to see what albums were reviewed, what albums were coming out, and what album could possibly get that all coveted 5 mic rating. Because if you got a 5 mic rating, that means it was the stamp of approval. You had a legitimate hip-hop classic on your hands. If you saw an album with 5 mics, that means it was a must-hear. Over the years, the Source gave out 45 5 mic ratings to a host of albums, many of which would go on to become classics. Some, maybe not. But today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to revisit some of those 45. Not all 45, but we're going to look back at about maybe half of them and look at them with 2025 eyes to see if those 5 mic scores still hold up. Yes, it's going to be the Source's 5 mic scores versus Soul and Stereo's 5-star scores. We'll see who reigns supreme and who has the dopest scores. Welcome back to another edition of the Soul and Stereo Sessions, and I'm very, very excited for this one because not only do I get to look back at the Source, very formative in my hip-hop years, but I get to compare those 5 mic ratings to my own scoring system, the 5-star system, which I ain't gonna lie, yes, I absolutely stole from the Source's ratings. Even as a fan, I was always obsessed and interested in debating which albums were the best and which ones weren't so great, and comparing my thoughts to the magazines and seeing where we aligned and where we didn't align. And sometimes it was okay to disagree. Back in the day, it was okay to disagree, y'all. So it was always cool to see how things lined up. But before we get started, there are a few caveats that I want to mention in this video before we roll. First of all, when the Source ranked these albums and gave them these scores, they kind of fall into 3 buckets. The albums that received 5 mics just outright. Then there were albums who originally got a different score. They got maybe 4 or 4.5 and were upgraded to 5. And then there are some on the list that they did not review at the time that retroactively got a 5 mic score. I'm going to talk a little bit about that second category. The ones who got like the 4s and 4.5s and got upgraded to 5s. As some people might say, oh, that's cheating. Why would you go back and raise the score just because public opinion says so? Well, it's important to remember that for the Source, 5 mics equals a classic rating. Soul and Stereo is slightly different. When I give a 5-star score, it's not because it's a classic, it means it's a complete listening experience. It's high-level listening. The Source is that too, but it has the classic designation. That's why I always say that you can't give an album a classic rating in the moment. Let me break it down so y'all don't miss what I'm saying. If, for example, let's say Biggie, who I desperately miss. Let's say Biggie dropped an album tomorrow. Okay, and I listened to it and it's dope. Well, I can only judge that album based on its quality. But a classic album is determined by more than quality. It's quality, its impact on an artist's career, and it's an impact on hip hop in general. We can't judge those second two without some time. So if our boy Biggie dropped tomorrow, I won't know the impact on his career 2 days after the album drop. We won't know the impact on hip hop as a whole 2 days after the album drop. That might be months, it might be years down the line. So once the Source scored their album and gave whatever album 4 stars or 4 mics, they went back once they realized that, oh yeah, this is a hip hop classic. Let's officially designate it as a classic. That's why some of these scores have changed, and that's the difference between their mics and my stars. They're judging by quality and legacy. I'm judging by quality, period. So when we start comparing these, I will designate what I think is a classic or what I think might not be a classic, but particular, we are only talking about album quality in this review, not so much legacy, although I'll touch on that. Got it? Hopefully you got it. If you're confused, run in the comments. But before we get started, can't wait for this video. Y'all do your boy a favor and do what we always do around this time. Make sure you hit the like on this video because I promise you're going to like what's to come. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to your boy. It's just a simple click. But I promise you, the more subscribers we get, the more content I will get. Maybe I'll do part 2 of this video because we're only going to do half of it right now. Y'all not sitting around for 45 albums. I know that. So we'll just do 20 something now. But if we get a lot of traction, maybe I will do part 2. And be sure to share it. Share this video with the hip hop fans in your life, especially those of you who grew up on the Source like me. So let's get it going. Let's talk about 5 mics versus 5 stars. We're going to go back and look at some albums that received the ultimate score. Let's see if these things hold up. Coming in first, we're going to start with an easy one. And this is Nas's Illmatic. 5 mics, of course. In my opinion, the greatest hip-hop record of all time. In my opinion, one of the greatest records of all time. So I understand the 5 mics. So, do I agree or do I disagree? Come on, player. You know I agree. Yes, I give Illmatic 5 stars, just like I respect the 5 mic score for sure. This is an easy one. No question, 5s across the board. Secondly, Nas's Stillmatic also got 5 mics from the Source. Now remember, this was Nas's big comeback album after years of, I don't know, people say that he fell off. I never felt like he fell off. He had one album that was a little suspect. But besides that, I thought he was fine. This was his big reminder that he was still that dude. I remember seeing this 5 mic score when it dropped, so I knew that, oh man, Nas is serious again. Do I agree? Yes, I agree. I also give this one 5 stars. I think Nas hit it out the park twice. Both of these receive 5 stars. And if you ask me, I would also put Nas's Life is Good as 5 stars as well. But y'all didn't ask me about that. But for those two, yes. Both, I agree. Both receive 5s. Now let's talk a little bit about Tribe Called Quest, one of the greatest groups of all time. So, their debut, People's Instinctive Travels and Paths of Rhythm. Yes, I always have to think about that title because it is so much. This album received 5 mics from the Source. It was a landmark release at the time. And I can understand why it received 5 mics because nothing else was like it. Do I agree? Not quite, player. I would give this one 4.5. And we will talk about this as we go through this video. It's not that I think that it was like, oh my God, why would you not give this the perfect score? I just don't think that it quite measures up. There's a few spots that aren't quite crystal clear, but in the moment. Because of course, I didn't listen to this album in the moment. I listened to it a little bit after. In the moment, I can understand it getting 5 mics. But with perspective, I only give it 4.5. It's a very good album. Not quite over the hump for me. Now, let's talk about Low End Theory. Once again, an album considered one of the greatest albums of all time from Tribe. They were just on an incredible roll in the early 90s with that jazzy sound. They received 5 mics from The Source. Do I agree? Yes, I do agree. I think this album is absolutely a standard, an album that I would easily call a hip-hop classic. Not sure I would call it, well, I think I might call the debut a classic as well. But yes, both for sure. When we're talking about both sides of that album, this album is a definite candidate for a 5 rating across the board. I agree with The Source on that one. What I don't agree with is an album that isn't listed here, Midnight Marauders. They only gave that album 4 mics. I give that one 5 stars, and I think it's actually better than the 2 albums we talked about before, and also a classic, but we'll get on that another time. So I don't agree with The Source on that one, but if we're talking low end, yes, 5s across the board. Alright, next is America's Most Wanted from Ice Cube. I promise you, y'all, it might be laughable today. Y'all might just know him from Are We There Yet? If you're one of the millennials up in the house, it's just like, oh, this is just the funny dude. No. Ice Cube was one of the scariest dudes in America at one point. And America's Most Wanted is one of those albums that we look at today, and it's like, that dude was onto something. Most of those themes hit very hard today. The Source gave it 5 mics because of its intensity, its rawness, and everything that made Cube Cube. Do I agree? I sure do. I think that this also is a 5-star project, and I think it's a just transformative album for the West Coast sound. There's so much that over the time where as the West Coast sound evolved, you kind of forget about this era of the sound, but it's absolutely important. For sure, 5 stars from me too. Next up is De La Soul, and De La Soul is Dead. This is a project that is sort of a rebirth of the group, and this coming out party was so celebrated, and I'm really glad to see them getting their flowers now after years of their music being in limbo. Now we can finally get it on streaming. It's getting the love it deserves. But The Source always gave it love way back in the day, bestowing it with the 5 mics for its quality, its thoughtfulness, and its production. Do I agree? Love you, De La, but no, I give this one 4.5 stars. Again, not that it isn't important, but I just don't think that across the board it nails it as well as it probably should. There's probably many other fans doing. I know I'm in the minority on this one because most people do think this is a 5-star project. And don't get me wrong, I do think it's a classic. Again, that designation between quality and classic. It's a classic for sure. I will say that. But I don't think that, I think there are a few weak spots, and that keeps it on the quality aspect from getting 5 stars from me. But if we're talking classics, for sure, we're in agreement. But doesn't quite get that 5-star from Soul and Stereo. Incredible project though. And now we get to talk about my boy, we get to talk about the man himself, the Notorious B.I.G, in my opinion, the greatest of all time, with his album. So first, Ready to Die. Yes, it got 5 mics from The Source, but that was one of the albums that was retroactively reviewed. Originally, it got 4.5 from The Source. Then it was upgraded to 5 because of its importance and classic status. Do I agree that Ready to Die is a 5-star project? Shockingly, I do not. And I love Biggie. I do not think it's a 5-star project. And I'll tell you why. I think the second half of the album has some weak stuff. There's a lot of stuff on the second half that's fun, but isn't nearly as intense or quality driven as some of the other stuff. If I was going through and pruning the album, there are about 3 or so songs. Like, I like Friend of Mine, like it's a fun song, but it's nowhere near the quality of some of the other songs on the project. The original One More Chance, If they put the remix up there, okay. So you see what I'm saying? There are some parts of the album that aren't just picture perfect for me, and that's why I would have stuck with the original score source. I would have given this 4.5 stars as opposed to 5. But again, it's a classic, no doubt. And now, of course, we get to Life After Death, which did receive 5 mics from the source. Again, in my opinion, the greatest double disc album in hip hop history. Clearly they agree. And if you know me and if you've been on this channel at all, you know, yes, I agree, 5 across the board. When I think about it, this may be one of my favorite hip hop projects of all time. Maybe the favorite. And the thing that makes this album great is even though it's long, y'all always hear me complain about long projects. This is a long project, but it never loses momentum. It keeps you engaged throughout across two discs, 2 CDs. That is almost impossible to do today. And he was able to do it very well. So yes, I agree with the source. 5s across the board. Next up is Aquemini from Outkast. Yes, I was very happy to see the source give Aquemini 5 mics. There was a very strong bias that was very pronounced at the time against a lot of Southern hip hop. Y'all know about the story and the Source Awards and the South got something to say. I won't rehash that. But yes, especially in the early 90s, there was a big bias against Southern hip hop. It was seen as less than. It was seen it wasn't lyrical enough. And it was different, but that doesn't mean it was bad. The way Outkast was able to take all of those Parliament sounds and funks and that the Southern soulfulness and the reflectiveness of their culture, it really resonated with me. And obviously, it resonated with the source. But do I agree that it's 5? I sure do. I think it's 5 stars. I think it's a classic. And I think it's Outkast's best project. And Outkast has a bunch of great projects. I think this is far and away the best. And yes, 5 for me as well. All right, let's get to Jay-Z. Let's get to Jay, and we will start with Jay's debut, Reasonable Doubt. Originally, this only got 4 mics from the source. I remember that issue very well. But of course, over time, it has been upgraded to 5 mics. Again, if you know me, you probably already know the answer to this, but what do I think? Do I think this album deserved 5 mics? Or 4 mics? Or less? I agree. It needs to be a 5-star project. Again, one of my favorite albums of all time. By far the best Jay-Z project of all time. He was just on another level. He was hungry. He had something to prove. And it really was a coming out party for one of the greatest of all time. But now let's go to The Blueprint. Yes, this is kind of his reawakening as... Honestly, you can call this the confirmation of Jay as the greatest of all time. So this one got 5 mics from the source. 2001, Jay was on fire. The production from Kanye and just Blaze, and it's an incredible project. Do I agree that it's just as flawless and deserves 5? I agree. 5 for me as well. I would give this project 5 stars too. Very, very strong. Very much cementing Jay-Z as the best. And when people talk about, oh, Black Album is better than, and 444, I'm like, y'all should mind. These, between Reasonable Doubt and the Blackout, those are the epitome of Jay-Z projects, both deserving of the highest honors. No question from me. And now let's go to Scarface, who, yes, has been the recipient of several 5 mic awards, not just as a solo, but as a group member. But first we'll start with The Diary. In my opinion, his greatest project. So originally this got a 4. And over time, yes, the source did upgrade it to 5 mics. But do I think that it's deserving of 5 mics? Well, I disagree on this one, y'all. I give this one 4.5. This is a great project. As I said, Face's best project. Absolutely, probably, I would say this is, yeah, I'd say it's a classic. I think it's absolutely an album that speaks especially for Southern hip hop. And for Face, it is the defining project in his discography. But it's just not airtight for me as far as quality, so I gotta give this one 4.5. No shade to Face though, great project. And then let's go to The Fix. Album that came out much later in his career in the 2000s. Again, this is sort of like his blueprint. for Jay. He was able to reinvent and reinvigorate himself for a new audience and just really show that he never lost what he had. So again, The Fix, 5 mics from the source. What did Soul and Stereo give it? Yeah, I disagree on this one. I only gave it a 4. It's a very good project, but I don't think that it has nearly the quality and standards of like The Diary. I think the Diary's here, The Fix is a step below. It's absolutely great and one of the best albums of the 2000s. But I think when it comes to the level of quality, it's not a big step, but a clear step below the best of Face. Good stuff. I'm not sure I would call this one a classic either, but for what it is, it's a great project. And sometimes it's okay to just be a great project. This is a great project. Not a classic, not 5 stars, not to me. Oh boy, now let's get to the controversial part of the list. And Lil Kim's Naked Truth. By the mid-2000s, the source's credibility was getting a little shaky, and there were a lot of albums getting these big scores that people were like, what? And this was one of them. And Lil Kim, I believe, is the only female artist to get 5 mics for a solo project. I need to double check that, but I'm pretty sure she still stands as the only one. So I'm a huge Lil Kim fan. When I saw that this got 5 mics, I was very hyped. So I checked it out. Do I agree that Lil Kim's The Naked Truth should have received a 5? No, player. I don't agree at all. Not on my life. Now look, this is Lil Kim's best album. It is not as celebrated and remembered as Hardcore, her debut. I know that's the game-changing album, and that's the album if you want to call it classic. That would be more in the conversation. But even if you're talking classic or quality, no. This is a good album, but it's long. It's got some absolute filler that doesn't need to be there. And it is another album that reaffirmed Kim as kind of like her status at a time where she was going through legal stuff and people were kind of forgetting about her and the industry was starting to move on without her. But like, no, we love Kim, and this is proof that she is who she says she is. And of course, you know how the internet does, y'all. When I ranked her albums on soulandstereo.com, it's like, oh, you misogynist. You misogynist. The source is better than you because you only gave her 4 inside of 5. Like, no, I love Kim more than all of y'all. But I gotta be honest, this was a good album. This is not a great album. This is not a classic. Probably still one of my favorite albums from that era. 5, not even close, y'all. Can't agree on this one. Alright, next up, y'all, is Bun B. Not Bun Squeeze, Bun B with Trillogic. Now, this is another one of those albums that came out in that weird era where people were like kind of looking at the scores and being like, what? But everyone loves Bun B. Bun B is part of course, half of one of the greatest Southern groups of all time, UGK. So if the source say he got a 5 mic project, who gonna question that? And they're like, okay, Bun is dope. He probably did that. Do I agree? Do I think this is a 5 project? Not on your life. Shout out to Bun. I love you, Bun. But no, this is not a 5-star project at all. This is another good album. It's a good album. But I don't see where it hits the levels of the albums that we talked about before. Even UGK's best stuff is like light years ahead of this. It's a solid album. I'm not sure what constitutes 5 mics for this one. It don't get anywhere near 5 for me, but it's a good project that you haven't heard. It's definitely worth a listen. Best? No. Classic? Not really. Alright, up next is the Fugees and The Score. So originally The Score only got 4 mics from the source, and once it became one of the biggest albums of the 90s, they did go back and they gave it 5 mics. And it's easy to see why. Like a lot of the Fugees, you kind of don't, you had to be there to understand how great they were. Because now that we're so far removed, we only know Lauryn Hill for memes for not showing up for stuff. And they don't really put out new music. And Wyclef really isn't around. And Pras, that's a whole other story. So we don't hear a lot from them. So their legacy has really kind of gotten lost to time. But let me tell you something. In that moment, it's easy to understand why they were upgraded because, yes, that is a hip-hop classic for sure. But the big question here is, do I agree? And I do. I would have given it 5 stars even in the moment. This is one of those seminal albums from my fandom in '96. I thought this album was world-changing. It made Lauryn Hill a star. It made Wyclef a star. It made Pras have one song. So the thing is, this really set things off for them. It was transformative. I love this project, and absolutely one of the best of its era, and really of all time, if you want to put it like that. 5 stars for me. Yes, it deserves the 5 mics. Alright, it's Dre Day, so let's talk a little bit about Dr. Dre. And of course, we'll start off with The Chronic. The Chronic originally received 4.5 mics from the source, which is weird. You think they would have went all the way for that, but maybe there was that New York bias creeping in, I don't know. But as we all know, The Chronic is long celebrated as one of the greatest albums of all time. So yes, they upgraded it to 5. Do I think it deserves 5? Duh, yes. 5 stars for The Chronic for sure. We are on the same page. Yes, it deserves 5. Easily. But then, Dre followed up with his comeback. And that was 2001, The Chronic 2, whatever you want to call it thing. Originally, again, that one received 4.5, got bumped to 5 along the way. Do I think it needed to be bumped to 5? This time I disagree. No, I think that, in fact, I would have kept it at 4.5 as a score because, I don't know, y'all. Like, it's a good project, but there's a lot of stuff that feels like filler. And even though there's some good stuff and there's some good album tracks people forget, there's a little bit of messiness. And some of those skits, them things do not age well. So even in the moment, I never saw that one as like a hip-hop classic, or it's one of those albums that's clearly one of the best of its era and moment, but I don't think it's one that has reshaped hip-hop by any means. So either if you're talking about classic or quality, I think it's just a rung below some of the legendary stuff we talked about here. And now, keeping in that West Coast vein, we're going to talk about Big Uncle Snoop with Doggy Style. Surprisingly, this only got 4 mics when it dropped. I was kind of surprised to see that in my research because this album, again, you had to be there, was one of the most anticipated of all time. The guy who was doing all the cool stuff on the Dre projects getting his own project, oh, we know it's going to be hype. And this is one of the first albums I've ever owned. So yes, the source upgraded their 4 mics to 5, gave Snoop 5. What did I give Snoop? I agree. 5 stars from me. One of the best hip-hop albums of all time, across any genre, across any decade. I think it still holds up. 5 for sure. The source got it right when they redid it. Alright, next is Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers. Of course, the Wu-Tang, incredible group. One of the most, maybe the most influential rap group of all time. My pick for the best rap group of all time. Yep. Even better than Outkast. Yep. Even better than Clips. I love these guys so much and everything that they've done to reshape hip-hop. And they only received 4.5 mics when they dropped. And they were upgraded when we just clearly 36 Chambers is a classic. So we can't deny that. Do I think it deserved 4.5? Do I think it deserved 5? Do I think it deserved less? I think it deserves 5. 5 stars without question. Without question. Again, not only is this one of my favorite projects, I think it's one of the most important projects. So in terms of quality and classic material, this hits all of those notches well for sure. 5s across the board. Alright, up next is Only Built for Cuban Links, Raekwon. So this album got 4.5 mics back in the day on the original run, but was upgraded to 5 due to its legacy and due to it probably being a smart idea. So what do I think? Do I think it deserved it? I guess I just gave it away. Yes, I agree. 5 stars, 5 mics, Raekwon deserves. Look, this is probably the best solo project of all the Wu albums, and it's probably the only thing that comes close to that almost perfect debut album. So well done, great production, great lyricism. I mean, we're still quoting it today. 5 across the board for sure. Easily agree with that one. And next is the infamous from Mobb Deep. So Mobb Deep is another group that was so impactful and important in its era, and we just don't hear about it today because we just don't hear a lot from Havoc. Prodigy has left us, RP Prodigy, and so there isn't this groundswell of support for the Deep guys like there used to be. The only time I see y'all talking about Mobb Deep is when you do these weird things on Twitter where you're comparing Wu-Tang, Outkast versus Mobb Deep. And I don't know when that has ever been a comparison. Never. I've seen Wu-Tang compared to Mobb Deep back in the day, but never Outkast. I don't know what this new thing is. Anyway, The Infamous was an incredible album and a huge jump from their debut project, which was, it was a huge jump. Classic songs, classic production. Absolutely, I can understand why it was upgraded from 4.5 to 5. Do I agree? Actually, I don't. Actually, I think 4.5 was the way to go on this one. Because, although all things considered, like we think about incredible singles and even incredible album cuts, I don't know, it just doesn't hit that next level for me. I can't put it on the level of Only Built for Cuban Links or Wu-Tang 36 Chambers or anything in that realm. Or even if you want to do the Outkast deal, I wouldn't put it up there at all with the level of Aquemini. But it's a great project for sure. One that deserves your ear, but one that should be considered an all-time 5 across the board, I don't know. But if you want to call it a classic, I won't argue with you there. Just wouldn't go 5. All right, and then now it's time for your boy, Tupac. We're going to talk about a couple of Tupac's albums, and we're going to start with Me Against the World. So there are 2 albums that Pac fans debate about which one is the best, and we'll get to the second one later on. But this album, I believe, was originally bestowed 4 mics from the source, upgraded after the fact, and I think it's a pretty incredible album and one that was really formative for those high mark years of West Coast 90s hip hop. One of those albums that really shaped that time. Do I think it deserved 5 stars? No, to me, this is a 4.5 star project. I would give it more than 4. I think 4 mics is a little stingy, but I think 4.5 is a little bit more in the place it should be. If we're talking about legacy and all of that stuff, I can understand why it would get upgraded, but we're talking pure quality, which is again what we're talking about here. I don't think it reaches the 5 star level. I think it's 4.5 at best. At best. And then now let's go to the one everybody's waiting for, All Eyes on Me. Now this project wasn't reviewed at all that I can tell before it was giving 5 mics after the fact by the source, where it was upgraded. And I can understand why, because it's celebrated as his best project. It's definitely his most known project and the project that's probably most synonymous with Pac. But we talking quality here on the Soul and Stereo Sessions. Does it deserve 5 mics? Not to me. Not at all. This one gets 4 stars from me at best. This is a double disc project, and to be quite fair, the consistency is not there. Not there. There's some mess on this album. And even though that people celebrate the big singles and there are some big moments and there's some good album cuts, there's some junk. There's some absolute junk. And I think even the most hardened Pac fan would recognize it. Yeah, there is some weakness in here. If you want to give it 5 stars because of what it meant to Pac's career, that's one thing. But if we're looking at just the actual content, and quite frankly, even if we're just looking at it as a classic album, it doesn't feel classic to me. It's important to Pac. It's important to Pac's legacy. Is it important to hip hop? I don't know. I don't know if you remove this album from hip hop that hip hop changes. And that's one of the things that determines a classic for me. So, nope, 4 stars, okay album, not even Pac's best album, not in least 5. And then finally, we are here with what I can tell is the last album to receive 5 mics from the source, Kanye's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Of course, Kanye is what he is today, but at his peak, he was the big change maker in the early 2010s and late 2000s. He was the guy. He was one of those artists that we talked about earlier who just really shaped the genre going forward in his image. And this album was part of that journey. When it comes to production, oh my gosh, that alone could be worth 5 mics. So giving this project 5 mics, it makes sense. But do I agree? Does it deserve 5 mics? Would the Soul in Stereo give it? No, I gave it 4.5. And I know that most of the children are throwing, I don't know what kids eat. What do kids eat? Lunchables? They're throwing Lunchables at their screen right now. Because it's like, oh, how dare you? This album is... It's not a perfect album, y'all. Production-wise, yes, it's a perfect album. For Kanye's legacy, yeah, if you want to call it important for that, I do agree with that, especially looking back, as this is like the last. After here is all downhill when it comes to Kanye. So as a Kanye fan, I can understand you putting it in high esteem. When I originally reviewed this album, I only gave it 4 stars. I've gone back and since given it 4.5 because sort of like we were talking about with the Pac albums, it's a really, 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 really good album with some stuff that isn't that great. Sorry to disappoint you. Runaway is not great. Just because it's long doesn't mean it's strong. I don't like that song. And a couple other spots that are just alright. But as a project, I can't hate on it. 4.5 stars, 5 stars, like we're talking this close. So no, I don't go all the way with it, but I think it's a very important album. I would easily give Kanye's College Dropout 5 stars. I think that is worthy of it. This one falls a little bit shy of the mark, but if you want to call it a classic, I will not disagree with that. It is one for sure. Alright y'all, that's it. I went through 25 of the 45 albums that received 5 mics from the source. This video long enough. I ain't gonna go through another 20. Maybe I will revisit that though. As I mentioned earlier, maybe we will do it. I didn't get a chance to talk about LL Cool J or EPMD or NWA or, man, there's so many of them out there. Like, I will save that for next time if y'all are interested. Let me know in the comments if you want to see a part 2 and share what you think. Are there albums here that I was a little too hard on that you think deserve 5 and I gave it 4.5 or I gave it 4? You think there was some that the source was completely out of their minds to give so much love to? Let us know below and let's talk. But again, remember, when you're talking about Soul in Stereo, we're talking about the difference between a classic and good quality. Most of these albums that we discuss, most of them I would call classics. A couple of them, that Lil Kim album, that's not a classic. Anyway, this edition of the Soul in Stereo Sessions is a wrap. I can't wait to talk classics with y'all and 5 mics down in the comments. Hit your boy up and play on, players. You know how we do.